here we are. Hi. So
Hello.
I'm very happy that I'm here with the brother ANASTAS. You looks like a rock band. I mean, by the way, it's I was
Pleasure.
thinking before it's this rock wave from Palestine. It's fantastic. I love it. So here is Milano, there is Bethlehem, and I'm very happy that you will be our next cover. And thank you very much for being part of this game and of this choice. And I mean, since consider that our friends that does not know so much your work, so can you explain about your firm, your story? Basically, I would like to start with your story. Now you are in Bethlehem, but you start in Paris. We met in Milano. So I mean, and I'm following your work for many years, which I love. And so I would like that you introduce yourself, explaining about your office, your activities, and your background.
So we thank you for having us. It's a real honor and pleasure to chat with you. And basically, so maybe the best way to start is to speak about the. So basically, we come from a family of architects. Both our parents are architects. Our grandfather was an architect. Our great grandfather was an architect. So it's a whole generation of
My
architects.
God, it's a nightmare.
It's a total nightmare. We grew up on, like, we spent a lot of our childhood on construction sites in the studio of our parents. So we were like already in the kind of mold of architecture since very young. And then went very naturally. We decided to study architecture, both of us. I did architecture in Paris, Yusuf too, and Yusuf did as well civil engineering in Paris. And then we started really being in between Paris and Palestine, trying to look at opportunities of projects and how to work in between the two places and what brings these two places together, and um, really being interested in different scales through architecture. In 2012, we won a competition to build a music school, a music conservatory. That was the National Music Conservatory. And it was our first project. And for that project, we took 1 year where we were really, although the scale was quite small, we decided to put a lot of energy and focus on it. And by the end of the construction process, the building was very anonymous. It's the way the building was designed was to think about the public space that it would generate. So it was more about the empty than the void that the building was created, rather than the building itself. And so very quickly at the end of the construction process, one day we got a phone call from the director of the conservatory telling us that basically the budget that they had for furniture kind of doesn't exist anymore because of the fluctuation in the currency, etc. So we had to look at other ways of furnishing the building within a very limited amount of money. So we decided to work with the network of people that were involved in the construction of the building to generate a whole collection of furniture that would fit into the architecture of the space, etc. And it basically ended up being the most incredible experience of the project, where we were transforming the construction site into a site of experimentation and of materials, and try to design furniture, chairs and tables and desks with the workers on site. And so it really affected us the way we think about architecture, and really looking at different scales and materials, etc. And then we decided to create a department of our studio that was called Local Industries, which focuses on design production and art production. And so basically throughout the years, the studios, we started being interested in materials. And in Palestine, we have a law that was inherited from the Ottoman Empire that implies that all buildings that are built in Palestine have to be built with stone.
Yep.
At the beginning of last century, the stone was very dominant as a construction material, very central in the way we think about architecture materially. And then since the apparition of reinforced concrete, but as well since Palestine has been occupied, this use of the material mutated, and we started using stone much more as a cladding of concrete, and pushing it not to act as a very noble material, but to be only used as a decoration of buildings. And this is something that was found in Palestine, but as well, it's a phenomena that was that was happening as well throughout the world after the 50s, after the during the modern era. So we started being very much interested in this materiality of the stone and how we can uh, investigate possibilities of working with local masons as well with very important stone quarries in Palestine to reposition the use of stone in a very noble way, but as well trying to respond to the global conditions of architecture and the global conditions of the planet, basically. Maybe you can so we created this as well entity in the office that looks at research and research that would span from material research such as stone, but as well more axed on territory and trying to look at how these two opposed scales can nourish mutually each other. And so this research aspect led us to have the capacity and the possibility to work in a kind of experimental scale. So we started getting commissions for museums, galleries, spaces to create experimentations in stone. The first one being a stone installation that was commissioned by the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2017, I think. And it was, what was really interesting for us is to look at, not only to look at stone, for example, as a material and trying to position new languages around stone in a very technical way, but as well trying to respond to very specific contexts in which the proposed aspect performs. So, for example, for the VNA installation, it was an installation that was speaking about the relationship between architecture and nature in Palestine, and how this duality in between these two things was fundamental to the way architecture was shaping the city, and how nature was really, in Palestine, the question of the land is very solid and very anchored in the mind of everyone. So the relationship with nature was very fundamental. And because of the ongoing political situation and the occupation of Palestine, there was a tendency to go towards a form of conquest of territory. So we started being pushed to conquest spaces, to protect our spaces and our lands. So architecture started to be used as well as a way to mark properties, to mark spaces in order for them to be preserved, and to fight this idea of annexation and expropriation of lands. So and then going back to our practice in March 2020, with some other friends, we co-founded an online radio station during the lockdown, Radio Al Hara. And for us, it's music essentially, but as well like talk shows, etc. And for us, the medium of sound and the way it created the whole community was very much architectural, and it's very much linked to the way we think about architecture nowadays. So it really became central in the way we work. And most recently, a year ago, we opened the Wonder Cabinet, which is a not-for-profit organization that kind of brings all these facets of the studio. It's basically how do we render our very private practice, our way of working at the core of architecture, as a public space. Yeah. And the idea of the Wonder Cabinet is to bring people working in different realms, spanning from music to food to architecture, to artisanship and makers, etc., to try to formulate new forms of knowledge and to contaminate in between different areas of knowledge, and to transmit knowledge to future generations. And for us, we think about the Wonder Cabinet for now as the basis or the foundations of a future experimental art and architecture school.
Okay, well, I mean, it's thank you very much. It's very clear, and I'm very happy because, as I told you before, the title of the cover of the magazine with your interview will be titled "Community," and I think it's fitting very well with the fact that you are dealing with a community which is composed by different characters and points of view and disciplines, willing to generate a, let's say, cultural, also a political project. No, I mean, this is very important. I'm happy you are using the word political, because it's I think that architecture is politics, clearly, and even more in the land you are living in. No, now you are in Bethlehem, you are in the middle of a terrible dramatic turmoil, and so I think that every act is, even the creative and the intellectual act, is fully political, because it's related with a community which is suffering, and which is also, I think, is called to define its own identity in those times, no? And this is, I think, this is very important. So, which is your, in relation to, I mean, the radio is so fun, it's very interesting, and then now the Wonder Cabinet Bethlehem are both ways to define new ways to stay together and to open a discussion, no? So, which are the let's say the key word, your way of being political in this moment through these actions?
Your way of being political. Yes, yeah. I think what I with hindsight, let's say that the radio, as well as the Wonder Cabinet, as well as the architecture studio, they're all linked together through this idea that there's nothing really planned in advance, but rather there's sort of a kind of a will of exploration, or a will of exchanging with the community, and the community around those projects is not only persons, but it's also land, is also territory, is also the nature, is also everything that happens around the environment of those projects. And in that sense, and also with hindsight, the idea of exchanging with that community has been very fruitful for every one of the for every section of our activity. For example, for example, the radio has been very much influencing our way of practicing architecture, in the sense that basically the radio is built around a community of people that play on a regular basis on the radio. So residents, we have approximately 350 residents on the radio that play monthly shows. Some of them are talk shows, some of them are musical sets, some of them are cooking shows, etc. So it's very various. But through several campaigns that we did on the radio that were, let's say, formalized into kind of protests. The first one was called Film Mishmish, and it was a protest that was on the radio for 80 plus hours. And it was initially a protest against annexation of even more parts of the West Bank by Israel.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting, beyond the local political aspect of it, is that people were participating in that protest that were from, I don't know, from Colombia, from Japan, from everywhere in the world, and they tried to protest that thing in their own way. So in their own way, while interacting with their own environment, and this has created a sort of even more powerful solidarities, or even beyond solidarities, even more analogies in between different, very contextual and local situations that suddenly become global through the act of the community.
Yeah.
And this has influenced our practice in architecture, in the sense that when we think about specifically in Jerusalem, when we think about constructions built by the Crusaders, for example, that were, let's say, masters of stone construction and stereotomy, etc. When we look deeper into the techniques that were used, and we trace the origins of the techniques, we realize that some of the techniques were imported by the Crusaders, and they also used techniques that they found in situ, in place, in Jerusalem. And those techniques were then re-exported. So you can find some, for example, some churches in the south of France that have that were built a few years after some churches in Jerusalem, and that have similar, very specific techniques than the churches in Jerusalem. And so it completely creates analogies in between very contextual situations that reverse the, let's say, the typical way we see architectural history. And so it becomes an enriching discourse about know-hows and very knowledge making in different places, etc. So I think in that sense is
Yeah.
political because it challenges a sort of a typical way of seeing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I love it. Meanwhile, I was listening to you. I remember a story which happened to me once. I was, I'm a, I love. I study. I love personally a lot Islamic architecture, and I was in Cairo, and I was in the middle of the Umayyad hospital and mosque, and I say, "Wow, but this is looks like Pisa, no? The Pisa, the." And then I discovered a few months ago that after that there is a neighbor in Pisa which is called the neighbor of the Egyptian, because Egyptian worker used to travel to Pisa to work as a master into the construction of the cathedral and in the main churches. In the meantime, they were traveling far back and forth from Cairo to Pisa, no? So you clearly recognize what you say, that no, that was the Mediterranean was a place to exchange, and the techniques used to learn each other and to influence each other, no? And this is fantastic. So I completely agree with you. You know that the origin probably of the Romanesque architecture comes from Armenian monks, which has been traveling from Armenia and arriving to Adriatic Sea on the coast, no? So this is so clear, and I like the way you are describing these things, and in relation to what you said before, no? I mean the fact that you switched to the idea that this stone was just an embellissement, no? A covering of the concrete, to the stone as the material, no? And I like the fact that you are describing it as a form of decolonization, no? Concrete as a form of Western colonization, let's say, and stone as a way to decolonize the practice through a full technical awareness and critical awareness. So can you tell me more about that? Because I think this is very interesting as a way to discuss about decolonization in a very specific term.
Yeah. Yes, basically the use of stone. In 1918, there was this bylaw that was set by the British Mandate.
Sure.
Forced all buildings in Jerusalem to be made out of stone. And officially it was to create a sort of a unified built environment. But de facto, it created had different political impacts on the city itself. For example, everything that was built out of stone but that was in the outskirts of Jerusalem was considered inside Jerusalem in the imaginary of people. Or else, for example, everything that wasn't built out of stone, areas that were in Jerusalem but not built out of stone, the demography of Jerusalem was measured to whether you live in an environment that is built out of stone or not. So it affected the demography of Jerusalem. So it was a very political tool. The material became, and the way you build it became a political tool, and it became also a territorial tool, and today also an environmental tool, because all the stone quarries are located, for example, in areas all stone quarries are in the West Bank.
Okay.
But in areas in the West Bank that are called Area C. Area C is an area that is controlled by the Israeli administration and security forces, but they're Palestinian lands. And in those areas, the Palestinian Authority has no jurisdiction. So what happens is that these areas are left a bit wild. So you can so the stone quarries are very over there are it's a kind of a very spoiled landscape. It's very polluted, etc. There are some villages around stone quarries are suffering of disease that is linked to dust, etc. So it's a very and so environmental constructions inside Israel, for example, or constructions that are supposed to be environmentally friendly, are built on the account of this happening on the other side. So there's a sort of a long history of stone use that has that links de facto the way of making architecture and the political with time, this law that was only applied to Jerusalem became generalized to practically all cities in Palestine. So today it's still applied, but what happened is that since it's very systematic law, everything is built out of concrete today, and everything is clad with stone. So
Yeah.
what happened is that all buildings look alike. They're all kind of the same, but they're all clad with stone. And this was I mean the when we started this research project, there was a reaction against this or towards this to address this sort of tendency of misusing in a way the stone that is available.
I think just to add on what Yusuf is saying is it joins a lot what you were saying with this Pisa and Cairo. It's I mean the whole research that is trying to focus on the idea of analogies and this idea of knowledge that really travels across borders and creates an enrichment of knowledge has there was a very strong supremacist way of reading architecture, the history of architecture that's very linear, and this idea of analogies is trying really to deconstruct this idea of having this very stable horizontal way of reading architecture,
Linear, yeah.
linear way. And I think this is the way uh, the way stone trying to investigate how stone construction very specifically on techniques that are found in specific places um, can kind of challenge this supremacist way of reading architecture.
Sure, sure. No, I completely agree with you. I was thinking, because I was impressed. I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was coming from like a 3 generation of architect, let's say. You are the third one or the fourth one? Fourth generation or the third generation?
Maybe
La
fourth.
troisième ou la quatrième? La quatrième?
Yeah.
So this is very interesting because fourth generation means more or less 1 century, no? And can you tell me more about the 3 previous generation? I mean, because they were working in Palestine, they were working in the same land in Bethlehem. It's original from this year. So how can you look at the work of your ancestors and in relation also to your work, no? Which is the level of continuity and the level of let's say of the broke of the changes in relation to that, because this is very interesting to me.
I think maybe we can add different things, but for example, one of the things that for me is quite incredible is to look at. So, our grandfather, the father of my father, was an architect, but as well as surveyor. So there was like this idea of even the way they would speak about someone that is an architect was always an engineer. In Arabic, it's an engineer. So he's basically has this array of different forms of knowledge that are embedded within the architectural practice, and that at the moment he was practicing. So in between the 40s and 70s, in Bethlehem, the city was still very small, and he was planning roads, and he basically had a very kind of he was very much invested in territories, and he was really defining how cities are connected to each other. And there was many of the roads that he designed were roads that were going from Bethlehem to other parts of the land that are no more accessible to us today.
Okay.
From one aspect, and the second aspect that I think is really interesting is that the generation that is before him were architects, but some of them were very much linked to. So our great grandfather was a stonemason as well. So he was an architect, but as well working a lot with stone as a mason, as a carver, stone sculptor. And now this interest in stone is coming back to our generation.
That's fun. This is very interesting. You want to say, Yusuf, you want to say something more? No.
Yeah, maybe a short thing is that basically I think what is maybe common in between those generations is sort of an emancipation towards the establishment of the way of making architecture in Palestine, whether with the Ottomans, with the British, and now with the Israeli occupation. There is different ways of practicing architecture, and I think through the generation there was a sort of a way of making architecture that wants to emancipate itself from
Sure.
any kind of occupations. Like we
So
can.
let's say the professional approach is a form of resistance and a way to feel it, to be independent in relation to the commitment. I know your work since many years, and I always very much in terms of architecture, I was very much impressed by the special quality and the fact that he was working on something very smooth but very close to communities, a place very generous, able to guest and welcome different kind of life and activities. And this is, for me, is one of the good character of architecture today, no? Being generous and being open to changes and to be resilient sometimes, no? To work on that. And I remember your the courthouse and the School of Music, but now probably also due to the situation, you are working on experimentation with stone. No, I remember the Biennale, your very good installation there, and also the V&A. I remember that, and many others. So, what I mean, considering the not easy situation, what is your phase of experimentation in this moment? What are you working on in terms of architectural practice and researches?
So basically we're now at the, I think, 12th iteration of the stone matter research. And the last iteration was shown last month or a month and a half ago in Doha. And it was a project that was trying to investigate ribbed structures with stone, inspired by the Gothic cathedrals that had a vocabulary that was found as well in different parts of the Arab world. But it's a very interesting and pivotal moment for the studio, because we are starting to implement projects, commissioned buildings with these techniques. We're currently working on a sort of a museum, a competition that we won in Saudi Arabia in Al Ola.
Wow.
That will be entirely built. It's kind of an underground tunnel that will be entirely built with one of the stone systems that we've been developing. It's basically one system that got patented recently.
Okay.
Maybe you can speak more about it.
No, yes. I mean, it's to answer your question. I think there's a side that is very difficult to be in Palestine.
Sure.
Everything is super difficult. Some things that we usually do in other countries without thinking of any kind of problematics linked to it are very difficult to do here. Even moving from one place to another, or having access to material, or some things are basic that are very, very difficult. So it ends up by being a situation that is very difficult to practice in. But at the same time, I think that it's a place where you can experiment more than anywhere else in the world, at least for us. So you can really experiment, because probably we're at a sort of in a place where the scale of also the scale of relations in between people in the society is stayed kind of small. Although the city is getting bigger, but those relations are still kind of small. So you have access to things, to artisans, to artisanship, to knowledge, to know-hows, to ways of making that makes experimentation even more easy. So I think that the Wonder Cabinet is basically built all around this. Is experimental productions in various fields involving architecture, but also sound, sonic content, even food, and also trying to create links in between those. And this is what is very hopeful, I think, in our work recently, is that this kind of practice, of experimental practice, is very much linked to the community that's around the Wonder Cabinet, but speaks also a global language.
Absolutely. Well, this is very important, because I think that one of the responsibilities of architecture is dealing continuously with the idea of hope, no? Of, we design something for tomorrow, and without hope you don't do anything. So,
Exactly.
and dealing with hope means having a stronger civic and political responsibility about what we will do, and on the meantime to design a community. I think is important. So the Wonder Cabinet, it's a way to design a network which is which is transnational somehow, and which is bringing people around ideas, around a vision, no? And I think this is a very strong political act, no? It's not a strong resistance, but it's a strong job. Design is more than resistance. Design is looking forward, no, not just to resist. And I think this is very important, no?
Yes, completely.
Yeah, I think this thing that Yusuf was mentioning before was just reminded me that it's still possible in Palestine to have access to artisans and craftsmanship that basically are allowing this level of experimentation. It's true that it's very present as well in different parts of the Mediterranean, and just remembered one project that we started working on in 2019, right before the pandemic, in Matera.
Oh,
and
yes.
it was a project that was commissioned by the city of Matera for the capital of culture, and then with the COVID that arrived in 2020, the entire project was put on standby since then. But we really found these synergies in between the way you can have access to artisans and stone masons in Puglia and Basilicata in Italy, and how these are very similar approaches, but similar approaches technically, but as well on a human level, it's very similar as well.
No, it's a kind of Mediterranean brotherhood, which is, I think, is fundamental. Well, congratulations for your project in Saudi. I didn't know that, and it's I'm looking forward to see it. So, well, I think our time is gone, and thank you so much. Really, thank you so much for your words, and and congratulations for your works. I'm looking forward to come and visit you for the Wonder Cabinet. It's a word I love, like wonder. So it's because wonder is a double meaning, no? It's a wonder, but in the meantime, I wonder, no? So I think it's fundamental. It's fundamental. So good luck for your work. Well, keep in touch. We'll see you somewhere in between Mediterranean countries. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Luca.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Ciao.